the stars, the sky. It's all a gigantic hoax. A lie.
The simulated universe is bound to make errors. You said that yourself, and that's exactly what we're experiencing.
So, what you're trying to say is that you fell here from another world?
Humanity never conceals its desire to control the heavens, and I'm no exception.
Let me ask you, have you in all your mighty knowledge ever heard the rumor that the skies of Teyvat are fake?
We defined the simulated universe as a miniature world that could be used to discover the traces of the eons. But now, it's become something far removed from its original purpose.
Two know little of the progenitor of all dragons. Before the dawn of history, long traversed the burgeoning chaos, seeking the answer to existence.
Oh boy, we are going deep on this one. We're going to be going back even further than the dragons in Teyvat, breaking down how Teyvat even possibly formed. And yes, I do think it is heavily connected to Honkai Star Rail. Maybe I'm late to the party here, but I have not seen anyone talk about this. But as I'm playing this game, I'm seeing all these connections and it's blowing my mind, so let's go over it. I do believe this explains a lot of the unexplainable things about Teyvat, but first things first, my Abyss video that I just released, that's an important one to watch. You don't need to watch it to understand this one, but it goes into great detail on the Abyss, you know, how time works differently there and how people seem to come and go, and how it just functions as its own void realm. Like we talked about the three realms, the light realm, the void realm, aka the Abyss, and the human realm, created possibly by somebody from Honkai Star Rail. Because in Teyvat, when there was just dragons and bishops, there was only two realms, the void realm and the light realm. But the primordial one came from Teyvat, an outside descender, very vague entity, defeated the dragons, not killed, that's an important detail, and created the human realm, the Four Shades Celestia, and basically catered Teyvat towards humanity. Humanity controlling the heavens is hinted at in Honkai Star Rail. Creating own universes is something else they do in Honkai Star Rail. You know, they travel through worlds, dimensions. So there's a lot of little pieces here, we gotta put them together. First things first, the dragons. Okay, they were around long before anything else in Teyvat. Where did they come from? Did they just always exist there? That can't be. They had to have come from somewhere, but we have no records of this in Teyvat. But I think that's why Honkai Star Rail comes in. This can be explained, and I am going to cover this in particular in its own video because I have to go into bigger detail. But to summarize, I think the dragons come from Honkai Star Rail as well. If you're not familiar with the term eons in Honkai Star Rail, they are mysterious, godlike, higher dimensional beings in Honkai Star Rail who preside over the universe. The birth of an eon gives rise to a path, then which the eon has power over. Eons also have the ability to bestow mortals with the power, making them emanators. And one eon I want to discuss in particular was Long. Long was an eon who represented permanence. He was also the progenitor of all dragons. That's right, dragons. Which means he was the original ancestor of all dragons that we know of in the Hoyoverse. That's huge. It was said that Long, the dragon eon, traversed the universe an untold number of eons ago, with the primary goal of seeking the meaning of life itself. He has descendants all across the known universe. Why wouldn't Teyvat be one of them? And Long was also described as having like a serpent-like body, kind of like a pep. So I do believe the original dragon sovereigns and the original dragons of Teyvat might just be descendants of Long, the dragon eon of Honkai Star Rail. I mean, why wouldn't Hoyoverse's own games connect to each other? That makes perfect sense. Now we can kind of establish where Teyvat came from, whether he created Teyvat in itself, like the land itself, or just the dragons and then they were left there to shape the land on their own. Who can say exactly? But at least it gives us a baseline of where Teyvat actually comes from in its original origin. Now let's talk about the Primordial one, because the Primordial one showed up, a descender in Teyvat, came from who knows where, and defeated the dragons, did not kill them, but just defeated them. Because if the Primordial one killed the dragons, there wouldn't be sovereigns around today, and Nibelung wouldn't have been free to leave in his defeat, the Dragon King. Now there's some baselines we have to go over. 1. The false sky and the fake world that's often mentioned in Genshin, and certain characters living in Teyvat seem to be aware of this. Number 2, the Primordial One came and created humans, and created the human realm like we went over in my last video. So that means the Primordial One had to have come from somewhere where humans already existed, or at least they knew what humans were. Because why else would they create humans? How would they even know what they are? So that means that the Primordial One could possibly also have come from Honkai Star Rail in some way or form. Whether we met that character or not yet, I don't know, but there are obvious connections to this. So let me just throw an idea out there. What if a character from Honkai Star Rail came to Teyvat, traveled on the Astral Express or through the Abyss or whatever means, came to Teyvat to create their own world or universe that's often mentioned in Honkai Star Rail, but there was dragons there, so they had to defeat them first, ended up defeating them, creating Celestia, its 4 shades, and establishing humanity based off of humans that they already know through Honkai Star Rail and other worlds. Because there are many worlds in the universe of Honkai Star Rail. We don't know how far this expands. But how would they just create a universe? Is the Primordial One just a being that turned into a god? Well, there is actually an explanation for this. Creating simulation universes and creating worlds is something that's heavily talked about and exists in Honkai Star Rail. We know that Honkai Star Rail is much more advanced. They have their space station where they experiment with pocket universes and things like that. Doesn't that sound a lot like the false sky and what we hear about in Teyvat? I went over in a video about a month ago how I think that Teyvat is this giant simulation, and this simulation is recorded by Irminsul and all this stuff. I go into great detail about that, but there's a device in Honkai Star Rail called a Stellaron. Now, what is a Stellaron? A Stellaron is a mysterious object spreading across the universe like a cancerous growth, and is nicknamed the Cancer of all worlds. Stellarons are considered seeds of disaster, which cause massive changes in civilization and ecosystems. This sounds exactly like what happened in Teyvat after the Primordial One arrived. The ecosystem changed, and this little pocket universe with its false sky was created in a sense. And Herta, who actually creates little universes and simulation universes, that is a scientist on the space station in Honkai Star Rail, describes Stellarons as a type of life form with a special property that tethers them to a certain path or eon power. They respond to the desires of the world in which they are tethered to. However, the cost of fulfilling these desires is a great disaster to that world. So you might be thinking, well, maybe someone from beyond the stars, from Honkai Star Rail, some kind of eon or powerful being, maybe even just an individual, created this little pocket universe of Teyvat, defeated the dragons, all that. That's fine and dandy. But wouldn't the Stellaron just destroy the world? Well, actually, the main MC from Honkai Star Rail actually has a Stellaron within their body and is able to hear their voice as well. So in this particular instance, this creation of Teyvat in this universe with a Stellaron in their body actually works and isn't super disastrous. Because life under the Primordial One was described as benevolent and good, and the MC from Honkai Star Rail actually is a good being as far as we know. Maybe Honkai Star Rail is like a prequel to Teyvat and a sequel at the same time, seeing as that we know that the Abyss is sort of like a black hole, and time and space can work in weird, mysterious ways. Speaking of the Abyss, actually, so we know that Stellarons cause this phenomenon called fragmentum. Fragmentum is this mysterious anomaly created by the existence of a Stellaron. It causes corruption and the spawning of creatures and monsters. Now you might be thinking, wouldn't that have been a problem when creating Teyvat? Even if the Stellaron is within your body, it's contained, and it worked, wouldn't that create a problem creating this whole universe and this whole world? Well, doesn't that sound a lot like the Abyss? The corruption and the monsters that come from that? And because they're different realms, and we don't know exactly how they work, but sort of like a black hole, different dimension, what if the fragmentum, the residue from the Stellaron, was just contained within the Abyss? Because we know the light and the void realms were almost intertwined together, whereas the Abyss was the odd man out. I went over this in my last video in great detail, but this actually explains how to contain the fragmentum corruption and why the Abyss in general has such animosity towards the light and human realms. Maybe the abyssal corruption is just fragmentum from Honkai Star Rail, the same anomaly that occurs when a Stellaron attaches itself to a world. But being that in this scenario it'd be within a human body, it doesn't have the same negative effects on the world, and this simulated universe created with the heavenly principles and everything thrives, but fragmentum still exists, and you need somewhere to put it. Or at least contain it, because like Herta says, in the creation of different universes and worlds, sometimes things don't go exactly how you plan it. So while Teyvat, the light in the human realms, humanity, and everything living under the Primordial One thrived and was prosperous, the Void Realm was stuck with this fragmentum, aka abyssal corruption, hence why beings like Dvalin, the heavenly principles, and people from the light and human realms get hugely corrupted by this energy and anomaly once it's reintroduced, and why the abyss and everyone that hails from it has such animosity and all the monsters that spew from it, causing absolute devastation to Teyvat, such as like the Cataclysm, in the same way that fragmentum destroys different worlds in Honkai and different planets they visit. It is also stated that nobody has found a way to destroy a Stellaron, but at most they can contain its energy. It is also stated that there are interstellar consequences, which sort of explains what we couldn't explain in my Abyss video as to why Teyvat is getting these random visitors from other universes and places, and why it's on the radar. It also explains why the Heavenly Principles tries so hard to not only make knowledge forbidden, but other people from accessing this little pocket universe that's created, because there is something known as Stellaron hunters. And if a Stellaron is known as like a cancer to all worlds and there's repercussions, it would actually give us now more sense as to why people are trying to breach Teyvat's borders. So let's just lay out what we've discussed. The dragons are descendants from Long, the dragon Eon. The Primordial One comes, who could possibly be maybe, the Trailblazer from Honkai Star Rail, uses the Stellaron within their body to create humanity, the human realm, now that coexists with the light realm and the void realm. We talked about in my last video, the void realm is incompatible with these two, and now the balance is mixed up and it doesn't work. Stellarons are a cancer to all worlds, but seems to have worked in Teyvat because there is a bit of a stipulation and an exception. The Stellaron is within their body, and maybe they're able to control it in a positive way that's not so destructive, hence why all the original civilizations in Teyvat under the Primordial One, the Shades, and Celestia all prospered and everything seemed to be good. Now where I think it went wrong is mixing in the abyss and the corruption that comes with it. And how did that happen? Well, I talked about this in my last video, but we'll recap. Characters from the light realm, such as like elemental beings, the sovereigns, Dvalin, you name it, don't mix well with the abyss, the corruption that comes with it, causing these beings to act out of character, like Dvalin attacking Mondstadt being one of the four winds. That's out of character. And it is already very hinted at that the Heavenly Principles, who hasn't been seen for 500 years in Teyvat, is corrupted as well. Now, I believe that the Primordial One didn't kill the Sovereigns because they're not a bad being, and they just wanted to create their own little universe for whatever reason we don't know. But when the Dragon King was defeated, they left through the abyss, the black hole, the void realm, whatever. And because the Sovereigns aren't compatible with the abyss, like we talked about in the light realm, Nibelung was heavily cursed and corrupted, and sought to bring justice to the usurper. So, when they came back, that huge conflict that took over Celestia and caused catastrophe to the world was just devastating to Teyvat and destroyed almost all civilization there. And ever since then, the current Heavenly Principles have just been awful. What I think happened was the Heavenly Principles was deeply corrupted from the abyssal influence from the Void Realm brought there by Nibelung, the Dragon King, and possibly a descendant of Long, the Dragon Eon. So the Primordial One, aka the Heavenly Principles, would have been compromised once being corrupted by abyssal powers brought by Nibelung, and maybe that's why the current travelers in Genshin that we have, maybe that's why they were sent there in the first place, to rectify this, possibly. Or perhaps maybe harnessing the third Descender's Gnosis was a way to kind of contain this as well. These are the questions that we just don't have answers to. Now, the Primordial One doesn't have to be the Trailblazer from Honkai Star Rail, that's just an example, because we know that Stellarons can live within a body of a human, and that the Primordial One came from somewhere that has humans, and modeled their own civilization and pocket universe over wherever they came from, obviously. And we know that in Honkai Star Rail, they travel between worlds. So, I mean, the connections are all there. These are all games made by the same company, Hoyoverse. And I think having a Stellaron in your body, if you are the Primordial one, mixed with the Void Realm's corruption that isn't compatible with you, I think that's drawing the attention of unwanted visitors from other universes and worlds throughout the galaxy, or however vast the world of the Hoyoverse actually is. I think that is what they're doing, because we know there are Stellaron hunters that search for Stellarons. There's probably a vast number of people that are getting their attentions drawn out to this little pocket universe. Characters like Skirk that are super unexplainable, or Sir Talugi, their master. And characters within Genshin and Teyvat itself, like the Fatui Harbingers, Alice, seem to be aware of this pocket universe that they're actually in. Because, like we talked about, universes and simulation universes are very much a common thing in Honkai Star Rail. So what if Teyvat is just one of these on a much grander scale? This also explains why the travelers in the opening cutscene were not allowed to leave, and why the Heavenly Principles does not take kindly to visitors or people that breach the borders of this simulation universe. But it was just created on top of the dragon's original world, causing a lot of animosity, and where we are today. This also explains why forbidden knowledge even exists in the world of Teyvat, because knowledge that is forbidden, if you came from outside the world and created this simulation universe with a Stellaron, you don't want people learning about everything that's happened and how it all came to be, causing corruption and people to go mad that learn this truth. Irminsul acting like a giant database for this simulation universe, recording everything that happens within it, but certain characters seem to be a blip on that, such as people that come from outside, like the Travelers, and how Irminsul can erase people's memories or change history and time itself. That's crazy. But if you view everything like this, it actually makes sense why you'd have that programmed like that, as a contingency. And if you're a Stellaron, or created a universe/world with a Stellaron, you don't want Stellaron hunters from other worlds or outside of Teyvat coming or being attracted. So you have to create barriers and borders that they cannot breach or find you. That is why forbidden knowledge and all of this exists. Visitors from other worlds and all of these things are not welcome. They are a threat to a corrupted Heavenly Principles. And why there's characters like Alice and the Fatui Harbingers, upper ranking members, that know about the false sky and the fake world. It does seem like these characters know exactly what's going on. And if this is all true, it makes a lot of sense. It kind of explains a lot of the things we have no idea about in Genshin. We just know that there's this vague creation from the Primordial one, this massive conflict in Celestia. We know there's a false sky, constantly mentioned, and we know characters can breach Teyvat's borders through the abyss, black holes, you name it. And now that we actually have Honkai Star Rail that kind of fills the gap in a lot of these questions, it does make a lot of sense. Now I know a question you probably already have is like, well, if you're suggesting that the Primordial one is the sustainer of Heavenly Principles with a Stellaron within their body, and that the Heavenly Principles actually was the Trailblazer that turned themselves into a god and created their own pocket universe that was meant to be benevolent and good but got corrupted by the abyss, well, there's two main MCs that you can play as, the male and female, so wouldn't that debunk it? I guess maybe. I'm not suggesting that it has to be the Trailblazer that created Teyvat. That's just an example that I use, but we also know in Teyvat's storyline as well that Lumine tends to be the abyss sibling in their own trailer. Even in the Teyvat main story trailer, Dainsleif even says, if you're worthy to rescue her. And in the other main story, it shows Lumine watching Conria be destroyed and working with the Abyss already as the Abyss sibling.
Step forth if you have understood the meaning of your journey. Defeat me, command me to step aside. Show me that you are worthier than I to rescue her.
So, because there's two playable characters, I would almost chalk that up more to as you just get choices on who you want to play as. But as for canon to the story, I do think one is probably favored over the other, although both can work. I don't know. Again, it does not have to be the main MC from Honkai that's a sustainer or anything like that. It's just an example because that is a character in that game that carries a Stellaron in their body like we talked about, so that's a great basis to go off of how I think Teyvat was created, how the dragons in Teyvat and the entire world of Teyvat as a whole was created, how the Abyss functions, the light and the dark realms, how they function outside of Teyvat. That is a mystery to me. If you can travel through the Abyss to different universes and worlds, like we know Skirk is not from Teyvat, and she's from the darkest corners of the universe. We just have no idea where she's from. Is she a Stellon hunter as well? Is she one of many individuals that have had their attention drawn to Teyvat with everything that's been going on? These are all questions, and it can be assumed that the light realm functions similarly, being that they're polar opposite, yin and yang of each other. But I went into great detail on that in my last video, so check that out if you haven't. That does cover a lot of stuff that kind of fills the void for this video, explaining about the Abyss and how that exactly works. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Honkai is directly connected to Teyvat? We know that universes, creating simulation universes, and controlling the heavens is something that's hinted at in Honkai. And it just seems like, why wouldn't these games be tied together? It's from the same developers. Creating this overarching massive universes where your games loosely tie together just makes sense to me. And because Teyvat's such an anomaly, the false sky, the creation of it, where everyone and these outsiders actually come from, descenders, they have to come from somewhere. And the Primordial one had to create humans based from somewhere else if they arrived in Teyvat. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hope you all are having a great start to your new year. If you'd like to see more videos like this or me cover Honkai, Star Rail a little more, let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe, help me grow the channel. I really do appreciate y'all watching this far, and as always, we will see you all in the next one. Later.